Okay, in this video I'm going to be talking about and demonstrating how you can use disks, which is a utility found in most Linux operating systems, to create an image file of a partition on your system. So I use disks to create image files as backups, and I save the image file to external storage hard drive, and I use disks when after I've installed a new Linux operating system and I'm happy with that Linux operating system, how it's working. I've installed all the software, and I want to create a backup of that. So if I break the system, or I need to relocate it, etc., I can take that image file and use this to restore the partition. So disks come in, as I said, in most Linux operating systems. I'm actually using Ubuntu 16.04 to demonstrate disks today. So in order to open disks, I'll just find it. It's called disks. I'm going to open it. So disks here is showing you my system. So at the top here we've got a 120 gigabyte SSD, which is running Windows 10, and I've used a 320 gigabyte hard disk to install some Linux operating systems. I've got a multi-boot system, so I've installed a number of Linux operating systems on this system, and I've got a 500 gigabyte hard disk also that is used to install Linux operating systems. So let's go through some of the notes that I've put together. Firstly, why would you want to create an image file? So as I said, an image file of a partition is an exact replica of that partition, and it's saved in a file format, so you can save that file anywhere you like that has sufficient space, and you can obviously copy and replicate it anywhere else on a external hard drive or a different hard drive on your system, etc. You do basically whatever you like with that file, so it's quite handy. What can you do with the image file? So like I said, you can use that image file to restore the partition that was saved as an image file, essentially restoring your operating system. You can restore the partition to the original partition, or you can restore it to another partition on your system, as long as it's that other partition, the destination partition, is equal or greater in size than the original partition. You can relocate the saved partition to a partition that is greater in size. So you may have a 50 gigabyte partition at the moment, and you want to restore it to another partition that's greater in size, like a 100 gigabyte partition. Disk allows you to do that. You can also relocate the saved partition to a different storage media. So you might have your operating system running on a hard disk, a traditional hard disk, and you want to relocate that partition and the operating system as it is to a solid state drive, a new solid state drive. So you can go and install your solid state drive into your system, and using the image file, restore the operating system as it was saved, in the state that it was saved, to that new solid state drive. I've put together some of the rules when using disks. These are the ones that I've come across. and I'll try and demonstrate this throughout this video. For example, you cannot create an image file of the partition that is in use by the operating system that you are using. So I'm using Ubuntu 16.04. I've booted into the operating system. I cannot, using this, I cannot create an image file of this operating system at the moment because I've booted into it and it won't allow me. So I can actually demonstrate that, but before I do that, I want to just show you through Gparted. So Gparted is a partitioning utility that's more commonly used than disks, but you can use disks to partition to create new partitions as well. So I will show you that as well. I'm just waiting for Gparted here. So Ubuntu is installed. Let's see, where are we? On a 320 gigabyte hard drive, and it's installed in this partition here, this one here. You can see that through Gparted. You can see the working partition. You'll see the / sign here, and actually it's not showing up here on disk at the moment, so I'm just going to pause the video and come back. Okay, I'm back. I had to pause the video and reboot the system because I had an issue with disks not showing the partition structure, but now you can clearly see the partition structure of the 320 gigabyte hard disk. What I was explaining before I paused the video was that you can't create an image of the working partition, the one that you're running Linux from, or your operating system from. So in here, the way to check in disks to find which is the working directory is to, I know that Ubuntu is on here, Ubuntu 16.04, and you can see here it's mounted at file system root. When you see that, here it says not mounted. For example, the adjacent partition, Ubuntu is not mounted, etc. When you see that, that means that yeah, that's the working partition. Anyhow, so if I was to try and demonstrate this, the way to create an image file is to click on the gears icon and you get create partition image. And if I try to save it in my default Linux OS backups directory, type password, you see you get an error. Unmounting file system. Unmounting file system. You can't create an image file. So I'll also show you once again how you can find the working partition in Gparted in a little while. So back to the rules. So we covered this one. The first one, the destination partition where the image file will be restored must be formatted in a file system. So if you're restoring your partition to another partition, that destination partition must be formatted in a file system format, such as ext4. It can be NTFS or other file system formats. I've only tried the ext4 and NTFS and they work okay. The destination partition where the image file will be restored must be equal or greater in size than the original partition that was saved as an image file. So I covered that before. So when you create an image file of a partition, it creates a file of the same size, and it copies the used and unused data exactly as the partition as it is in the partition so the file becomes the same size as the partition. And when you're restoring that image file to a partition, the destination partition can be the same size as the original partition or greater than that size, the size of the image file. So it's quite handy if you're, for example, wanting to relocate a partition to a larger partition. The destination partition where the image file will be restored can be of a different file system format to the image file. So for example, if you save an ext4 formatted file partition to an image file, you can restore it to an NTFS partition. I've actually tried that and it worked not a problem, it worked fine. Here are some just some steps on how to use this to create an image file. So you basically select the partition, click on the gears icon and select the create partition image and save the you can rename the file, you can name the file how you like and save it in a destination of your choice. So before we do that, I'll go to the next point. I was just going to go back to disks and show you how we could use it to create a partition here. The other cool thing about disks is that you can delete and create partitions. So for example, this is an unused one, I'm not using it at the moment. I'm just going to delete it, and the way to do that is to click on the minus symbol or icon, and to create a partition you'll see that there's a plus. So I could create another partition here to a ext4 file system format or into NTFS, etc. So one of the good things is that if you create a partition of a particular size, the size of that file, the image file, will be the same size. So you could start off with a very large partition that has a lot of unused space, and create a very large image file. But what you can do is this is a little bit of a step that you can use to optimize the size of the file. You can actually go into gparted, shrink the partition down in size, and then create the image file. So I wanted to demonstrate that. Let's go back into gparted. I've actually gone ahead and already done this step, but I'll show you how it can be done. While that's loading, we might actually lose information here. Yes, we did. Okay. There seems to be a conflict between gparted and disks. Whenever I open up gparted, the information on it looks like the 320 gigabyte hard drive partition structure and information is not correct. So if I go back to, so you can see here in this partition SDB10 I have Fedora 25. Now this was originally 50 gigabytes, but I shrank that Fedora 25 partition down to 10 gigabytes using gparted. And the way to do that is you can select the partition and then resize or move, and using this slider, I could even slide it down and reduce the size even further. So originally it was at around 50 gigabytes, and I shrank it down to 10, It's around here. It won't let you go beyond the point. The yellow shading indicates that part of the partition has is being used, has some files, etc. And this is the white part is all the unused space. So you can see this Fedora partition, only this yellow shaded part, which is about 8 gigabytes, is used, and the rest is unused. I just moved that. Sorry. Alright, so the way you do that is, if I wanted to resize it back to the original size, I just click resize. It's a pending operation, and then you click apply, and you can undo the last operation. Let's do that. So anyway, so I went and shrunk this Fedora partition down to 10 gigabytes, and using disks, I can't highlight it now, I went ahead and created an image file. And if we go to where the image file is stored, and let's go to where are we? There it is there. So you can see when I originally created the image file, it was 50 gigabytes. I had an image file for a new install, and I later created another one for a working install, which was the way I liked it. Anyway, so you can see that I created a image file that's 10.7 gigabytes, which represents this partition now that has been shrunk down. And you know, if I go back to here, if I wanted to restore that somewhere else, like in here, so it's currently from the partition is currently in the 320 gigabyte hard disk, but if I wanted to restore it in this free space here, which is roughly 50 gigabytes, I first have to create a partition with a file system, and you know, I'm going to use ext4. I could name it, but I'm not going to do that. Type in password, and there you go. I now have a partition there. And if I wanted to go ahead and restore the Fedora 25, the 10 gigabyte image file into here, that is 53 gigabyte partition, I just click on the gears icon, restore partition image, select that 10 gigabyte file, the Fedora 25 10 gigabyte file, click on open, start restoring, restore, type in password, and you can see it's showing a progress bar here, and it's restoring the disk image. And that's pretty much it's as simple as that, actually. And that also demonstrated the other thing I mentioned, which was you can restore a partition into a partition of a larger size, or equal or larger size. So I'm going to stop that operation there. Don't need to restore it there. And then just go back to the notes. So yeah, just as I mentioned, you can shrink the partition down before you create using gparted before you create the image file. That's quite useful. It'll save you some storage space. You don't want to have, I guess, large image files stored in on your external hard drives, etc. Now this is another interesting point. If your system has only one operating system, say for example I was only running Ubuntu, and I didn't have a multi-boot system, to create an image of the partition containing that operating system, what you do is you could boot into an operating system from a bootable USB or live image of that operating system and run disks. Should be disks. I'll just correct that. From the live system to create an image file of the partition. So You could use the USB if you installed your Linux operating system through a USB. You could, once you've installed it, you can go back and boot into that USB, and provided it has disks, it contains disks. Once you've booted into the live CD of that from the USB, you can use disks to highlight the partition of your newly installed operating system and create an image file. So that's how you'd do it if you had one operating system and you couldn't go to another operating system. So put into for example Peppermint to create an image file of Ubuntu 16.04. If duplicating or relocating a partition to another partition, boot into the operating system controlling the boot process or boot screen and update the boot file, boot menu, or sorry, that's an error again, or grub file, grub screen in the case of a Linux operating system controlling the boot process. So all that's saying is that I can, for example, because I've got an image already created of Ubuntu 16.04, I could go into disks and using that free partition there, that free partition that I created earlier, I could go and restore a duplicate or a second version or copy of let's see, where's Ubuntu? Here we are. It's 50 gig. I could actually go and restore that image file into you can see it progressing or restoring the disk image. I could go and install Ubuntu into this new partition created in the 500 gigabyte hard disk and have two versions of Ubuntu 16.04 running on my system. But in order to do that, obviously you have to go back in order to see that, to be able to boot into that new partition that I'm creating. I have to go back into the operating system that's controlling the boot process. In my case, it's on Targos here. I'd have to just boot back into Targos and run the commands to update the boot menu or the grub file, grub screen. And once I reboot, I'll see two versions of Ubuntu on the grub screen and select the one that I want to boot into. So that's quite handy, I guess, if you wanted to duplicate your operating system, have two versions of it running. Let me just stop this process here. So yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a quite a useful feature or example of what you could do. So I've covered that. And the last point is basically just how to restore an image file. I mean, it's I've already shown you how to do that. You click on the gears icon, restore partition image, go to the location of where your image file is stored, pick one of the one that you want to restore, and open it, restore it, and there it goes. Once I put my password in, there it goes. It's restoring the disk image. Yeah, so I'm going to stop that. So in a nutshell, I think I covered all the steps and explained how you could use disks to create an image file of a partition. I hope you found it useful. I certainly use it to back up my partitions on a regular basis, and I think it's a very useful feature that may be overlooked because of Gparted. A lot of people use Gparted for their partitioning and may not be aware of the feature, this partition image feature as found in disks. So yeah, like I said, I hope that you found it useful, and yeah, go ahead, and if you have any comments, please let me know, and have fun creating backups of your partitions. Thank you, and see you soon.